All right, so we should be connected, and people are starting to pop into the webinar. Thank you everybody for joining. Today we're going to be talking about writing for AI and how AI is changing content strategy in life sciences. Quick introduction. My name is Donato D'Andrea. I'm the president and digital strategist at Raincastle Communications. We're a full service digital agency specializing in branding, messaging, corporate identity, website design and development, of course, and then kind of anything you need after from marketing collateral, ongoing digital marketing campaigns, optimization tactics, and so on. So that's a little bit about us and our background and why we would host a webinar like this to try to just build up our community and get more exposure so that when you do need these services, hopefully you'll consider Raincastle. We're the host. I'll be chiming in with some things today and also setting the stage for the presentation. But the speaker today is going to be Lauren. So Lauren, I'll actually shift it to your bio as well. And I guess now that people are in here, I can get off the presentation. Just wanted to have it, showing that screen when we first landed. But Lauren's been a great resource for Raincastle with some of our clients, and now also some of our own marketing. So would love to have you give your introduction, Lauren, and talk about kind of your background and what you're going to be covering a little bit today. But we'll get into that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Paracol. I am a strategic healthcare communications consultant. I've got over a decade of experience in agency, in-house, nonprofit, life science, pharmaceutical, biotech, patient advocacy, communications, and PR work. But really, my focus has been helping these organizations build scientific and health brands from the ground up, really, over the last decade. My specialty is in translating complicated scientific information into engaging communications for audiences. And that's either, through messaging, content strategy, narrative development, and all of that encompasses the brand strategy, thought leadership, public relations, and digital strategy that life science companies really need to succeed in this digital era. So my expertise in sort of bridging the gap between innovation and understanding is especially vital in crafting AI-friendly content.
Awesome. Yeah, we're so happy to have you on today to cover this important subject.
Yeah,
So to
thanks.
talk a little bit about the presentation and just kind of set the stage for you. One thing I should mention too is we did put in some time at the end for Q&A. So I'm sure everybody on this webinar by now is probably familiar with how that works. Just find the Q&A feature in the bottom of the menu and you can pop in your questions at any time, and I'm going to try to monitor them over the course of it. Might even jump in and answer or ask Lauren to answer some of them during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll just wait to the end and I'll go through those too. But as you do think of questions, please enter those in because that's usually where some of the fun discussion happens. The goals of this presentation today are to talk a little bit about understanding how AI changes content discovery, learning what it makes, learning what makes content easier for AI to interpret, and kind of looking at it through the lens of life sciences and similar companies and how to structure the content for visibility and trust. And that's kind of the overview information in the beginning. And then what we really wanted to do is identify the practical steps you can take with your own content. And Lauren will be going through some guidelines and a process that you can go through. Because the good thing is that you'll see is, there's a lot buzzing around and you'll see all these different gurus recommending all these little micro, like random tactics and things you can do with your content to make it work better. But this hopefully will organize a lot of those different strategies and tips into a more of something you can take away and use on your own from your own for guidance instead of feeling overwhelmed by so many different voices coming from every direction. So that's what we're hoping is to give a little bit of education plus some practical tips and a framework to go by. Kind of going into the next section, talk a little bit about the new search journey and how things are changing. So really, I'm sure you're all by now, or everybody's going to AI search, and it is very common that more people are searching that way, or at least incorporating that into their search. A lot of people are still searching Google and traditional. A lot of people are using both, and some are starting to use AI search more so than the other. So just wanted to talk about the differences with traditional search when we were creating content in the past. People are searching, they see a list of links, they compare, they have to go back and forth comparing websites. I know one thing I've been loving with search for the last few years is just the AI overviews. If I need a quick answer to a question, I don't have to, click on a bunch of websites and have half of them, either fail to load or wait for the ads to finish loading and get my answer quickly. And that's where AI search is really so attractive to people is that they can just ask the question and get a synthesized answer from a ton of different sources on the internet and make decisions on their own right away. So it's a lot quicker for people to get the answers. It's still very important to be part of that conversation. It just changes some of the goals, and which we'll talk about in the next slide. Before I moved on to the next slide, a lot of things, one thing that people, not everyone knows and understands is that when it comes to AI search visibility, there are two primary groups. There's cited sources and brand mentions. And I'm just going to give you a quick view on one where I just did a search for CDMO services, and you can see the AI overview popping up. And the AI overview is becoming more and more frequent on many different searches. Before it seemed like it was on a smaller percentage of searches. But now for something like CDMO services, you would have thought that's more of a commercial intent-based search. But in this case, it's treating it like an informational and it's answering the question of what that is. And you can see here, the sources that are being cited are in this column. So that's a good place to be. If you're getting cited on the source of an answer, you're clearly building up some authority over that topic, which is great. But a mention is actually in this area and is part of the answer. It's answering the question of what a CDMO is. But then eventually it just says top CDMO partners and it's mentioning three companies. So the mention is kind of that business value, like ultimate goal, while the site being cited is kind of a good foundation to expect to get into this area. But you really do need to try to get into both of these areas because it's hard to expect to be in the mentions without being a source that's worth citing. So you can see here that you have the Thermo Fisher and Catalent are listed as cited sources in addition to those mentions. And one other thing to note is that there are only three mentions. So this can happen in some searches where before, if you were in the top, like many years ago, the top 10 of Google, you're kind of jumping up and down excited. But now they don't even show that many. It's only three. So unless you're really doing a lot to get a lot of authority over these topics, you want to make sure you kind of get into that shorter list of results. And one thing that's nice even on this example is this is even above the kind of those paid ad results too. So it's kind of cool that if you do achieve this, you're getting better placement than even some of those expensive ad placements. So just wanted to highlight that because a lot of people are doing a lot to try to get cited, but not as much attention paid to mentioned, or they're only caring about are we mentioned and not realizing that to get mentioned, we need to make citable, worthy content on the site. And to get cited, that's where Lauren's going to hopefully work through today. It goes into a lot of repetition in the right order and making it very clear that you're an authority over that topic. And if you just did enough of it and didn't know what you were doing, but you were doing good quality content, it's possible that the AI would just be smart enough to realize that you're, the worth citing. But you're much more likely to get cited if you follow these guidelines we'll talk about today. So kind of covered this a little bit. It's just really a different approach to the goals of what you're trying to do, but traditional versus AI. There's before we used to just publish content, get indexed by Google, with the goal being to rank high enough to earn a click. And that was how it was measured. That's how you got over the years, these crazy goals of trying to do a blog every day or just cranking out content to rank for every single word known to that's even moderate, like eventually it became whether it was either directly relevant to your company or even like loosely relevant. And now it's kind of shifting more towards let's focus on high quality, intentional specialty content so that we'll get selected, summarized, extracted. And the goal is that, hey, there's a lot of things that could be relevant for us from a topic standpoint. But if we're really going to drill down and become the topical authority, then we're going to become a part of that answer. And the part of the answer is the mentions in the citations. So just a little bit different in terms of goals. You still have to publish content and get indexed and ranked. But if, at the same time, you're trying to also get that topical authority over these areas. And the main thing that it could change is that, hey, let's worry less about how much we're publishing and more about what we're publishing and with more purpose and intention. So I think that's where we can shift it over to you, Lauren, because you're going to put it into kind of more
Yeah.
better explanation in terms of how to actually go and do that. And also, I think related back to this life sciences and this types of content a little bit better, and how it isn't completely foreign to what you've been doing in the past. It's just a little bit of a different approach.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks, Donato, for that intro because the biggest takeaway for this presentation is that online content really has a different job now. It's not trying to just rank in search results. It is being used as source material, like we just saw on the AI generated answers for a, a niche topic on Google. And that really changes what success in writing looks like for us because it's not just earning a click. The opportunity now like has the opportunity is to become part of the content itself, become part of the answer itself. And so how we should write differently is requires like a structural change. It's not just the language or the text or the topics. We almost need to take the way we traditionally write and flip it on its head. So like, our traditional structure of writing is we build towards the answer. We give context first, we build a story, then we give the details, and then at the end of the paragraph, we get the answer. And that is great if we're talking to other humans. But when we are increasingly talking to bots, because as of just a couple of weeks ago, 53% of all internet traffic is bots. So that means that more than half of your readers will be computers. When we're writing for those computers and readers who scan in mind, we really have to structurally write differently.
hmm And
It,
one just to jump in too, one thing that we talked about is, we write content like we're talking to humans, but it's there's the computer, but there's also the human that's almost it's talking to somebody through a website is different than having a full 10-minute, 15-minute long conversation, where we only have people for so long on websites and it's only getting shorter. So it is interesting where it is a lot more direct, and it's like, okay, don't think of it as how you talk to a person and, where you're having an actual conversation. Think of it as, how do we kind of, balance it? So that was an interesting kind of, I think, revelation that we discussed.
a huge revelation, and that is these are now the tactical execution of how we bring that to life online. The rest of this webinar, really, and but I think what's really important, Donato, is a distinction is that this flip in structure. This does not mean that storytelling disappears. Like
Yes.
good storytelling still matters a lot, especially in life sciences where context is essential. So, but the difference is that like this key information in the story is going to be introduced much earlier, which makes it easier for people and AI to understand what the page is about.
Yeah. Everybody needs to be told, why do I care and why should I keep reading a lot earlier
Wonderful.
nowadays. hmm
So if we go to the next slide, I think we're just going to start talking about what makes content AI friendly. I think that when people hear this phrase, AI friendly content, like they assume it's an entirely robotic new way of writing or they write like they read the responses. But no, really, like it's the same principles that make content easier for humans to understand, also makes it easier for AI systems to interpret. And it just follows like a few rules. It follows these three rules. It's structured clearly, it's explicit, it's not verbose, it doesn't have jargon, and it's consistently reinforced across multiple pages online, on the websites, on social, whatever it might be. And really, as communicators, like none of these concepts should feel foreign. Good writers, we've always tried to be clear, organized, and intentional, but like we just said, what's changing is that we're not writing for humans anymore, we're writing for systems that interpret, extract, summarize, repackage information before a person ever reads and extracts it themselves. So we're not really talking about like necessarily gaming these AI algorithms though when it's talking to writing for content for AI either. We're talking about just making content easier to understand, easier to navigate, and easier, importantly, to trust. So these seven principles that we're going to talk about today are really like extensions of these three ideas. Yeah. So AI friendly content is structured, explicit, and consistent. And so, how do we put that into practice? Well, when we nailed down on it, we found that these recommendations fall into these three goals quite broadly. First, make the information easy to find. Second, make the information easy to extract. And third, make the information easy to trust. So, really, this first group of seven principles is all about helping AI identify sort of the correct information on a page. Because if an AI system can't determine what your page is about from the first couple of sentences, it's much less likely to use it in any of its summaries. So that means that these first three principles of leading with the answer, using question-based headings where it makes sense, and breaking concrete content into discrete and distinct sections where appropriate, it helps parse this information out and make AI easily find it when they land on your web page. Then this sort of second set of content principles, format for scannability, and be explicit and reduce ambiguity wherever important, wherever possible. This just makes AI able to interpret your content more easily because scannable formatting, clear structure, clear language just make AI able to go on the page, look, oh, think this is what it is, and accurately extract the message and the key information that you're trying to communicate. And then finally, these last two principles, reinforce key messages and structure content based on its purpose, is all about instilling trust in the AI, kind of in the same way that we would with humans. AI and humans don't look at like individual pages in a vacuum, right? They look for consistency across your content. And so when your messaging is aligned and your structure is clearly aligned to the purpose of the page, you create stronger signals to your readers, whether that's AIs or humans, about who you are and what you do. And so we're going to dive into the specifics of each of these here, but I want everybody listening to not feel like they need to memorize these seven principles. Really, it's just more about kind of incorporating these three overarching goals of find, trust, and extract.
Yeah. So we'll go through each of them individually. And I should have mentioned at the beginning, I will also share the slides with everybody that's joining today as well, because it is a useful reference.
Yep. So let's dive in. Principle number one, the first one is to lead with the answer. So one of the biggest shifts that I have seen in writing for AI is recognizing that AI systems are looking for direct answers, just like Donato showed on that Google search. Like if someone searches a question, usually the most useful content does not build up to an answer. It starts with it. And that doesn't necessarily, in life sciences, we're always worried about keeping context and nuance and specificity in there. That doesn't mean removing any of that. It just means presenting the key information first and then expanding on it with explanation and detail, just like we talked about the shift in how we write. And so this is already kind of a principle of good communication that many of us already probably use because whether your audience is like patients, healthcare professionals, investors, general public, leading with the main point will always help people understand what the page is about more clearly. And AI systems work in the same way. Um, they don't want to navigate through the page to infer what the main message is in multiple paragraphs with different words saying the same thing. They are trying to efficiently answer the question as quickly as possible. And so here on the right side of the page, we have like some examples. An example of a less AI-friendly sentence, for example, is over the last decade, advances in gene therapy have created new opportunities. Okay, it starts with sort of a broad context about advances in gene therapy, but it doesn't even define what gene therapy is. So this sort of stronger example, more AI-friendly, is just clearly starting with gene therapy uses modified genes to treat disease. We immediately answer the implied question of what is gene therapy? So, like, we've established this answer, an additional context that comes down after the page. It becomes more meaningful for anybody reading it because now you already know the question that the rest of the paragraph is going to answer. And so, again, I just want to remind everybody this isn't about simplifying science. This is about reducing ambiguity. Like the pages should be clear. What is the content about? What is the reader going to take away from it? And so the next question you should ask yourself is, how do we organize the rest of the page to ensure that? And so that starts with the headings. So principle number 2 we've come up with is use question-based headings. And this really is built on the idea that like how information is organized is just as important as what is on the page. Because headings are not just visual formatting. They are big, obvious words that have script and code in them formatted to tell readers and to signal to the computers what each section of the page is about. So your headings are one of the most important pieces of language that you can put on your page. So one way to make AI signals really clear and answer the question that your page might be asking is to use this sort of question-based headings, which you'll see a lot if you've already kind of used AI to answer questions of your own, because people talk to AI like they talk to humans. Um, so questions really reflect how your audience is actually searching for that information. People are increasingly talking to AI in a conversational way, asking like, how does mRNA work? How do vaccines work? What is gene therapy? Instead of typing these keywords in Google. So using questions that people might innately be asking themselves when they're thinking about the topic as you're heading is just like a really easy way for AI to pick up and interpret your content.
Mhm.
They also like, so that's about how users search, but they also improve readability. And we're going to talk a lot about readability and structure as we continue to go through this, but creating a logical flow through the page and communicating clearly what idea each section is about is something that I think like when we think about our website content, it might feel elementary, but it's something that gets lost. And creating like these neat boundaries between ideas, while that might not be how we have historically written as storytellers, it is what makes AI systems able to identify and extract the relevant information at a much quicker pace. But that said, like every rule, this is not a rule that every question needs to be a heading, right? Descriptive headings can be just as effective. The goal is really just to make each section immediately obvious. So whether it's a question or a super descriptive heading, clarity should be your number one and should always come first.
Yeah, one thing I liked about your example, Lauren, with the how does our platform technology work is, we're focusing mostly on visibility today, and but there's also people are comparing companies to others using AI. So if somebody asks, how does this company's platform compare to that pl company's platform, the AI will deliver a much more accurate answer when it does have these kind of leading headings being explained how it works so that it could answer accurately and questions like that.
Yeah, and we have like an example later in this presentation that shows exactly how effective that can be.
Mhm.
So then, yeah, so like now we've clearly signaled what each section is about. And so now the next step in this is really making sure that each section stays focused. So that brings us to principle number 3, break content into distinct sections. So like imagine an AI is asking itself, how does this company's platform work? Just like Donato said, 1,500 words is not going to get through to the AI or to any human reader these days. They're just looking for the section that answers the question. And for me and for all other communicators, this is a really good lesson in brevity, because like fundamentally one of the biggest problems we see in web content still to this day, and especially in life sciences, is trying to cover too many topics in one section. We cannot cover a product's technology, applications, benefits, and supporting data in a couple paragraphs under the same section and think that we're going to be able to walk away with a complete understanding of what it does. It doesn't. Like usually that gets mixed together into one long narrative that's been determined by a company or a PR agency or whatever it is. And it makes it hard for people to understand what's important out of that narrative. So really the solution is to kind of think of your content as building blocks, self-contained building blocks. Each section should achieve these three things we have listed on the left here, which is communicate one complete idea, answer one primary question, which is ideally related to that complete idea, and then each section needs to be able to stand on its own. So if you took this section out of the webpage and like put it on a blank piece of paper, ask yourself if your audiences would understand its context and the information it's trying to deliver. If it can't, then you might need to reevaluate what the content in the section is. So that's just like one of those questions you should ask yourself as you continue to write for AI. So in this like example of how we might do it more AI friendly on the right here, the left is everything mixed together, but the right is the same information as in that first sentence, organized into clear sections. What it is, how it works, applications, and supporting data. And again, we're not simplifying the science. Nothing has been removed. We're just simplifying the organization of the information in the topics. Oh, and supporting data, this is actually a really great example. Like instead of sprinkling inline references throughout the page, create a clearly labeled section for it. Like, not only does it make it easier for readers to understand and look for investors, it makes AI able to recognize it as supporting audience evidence, and then you get listed in those beautiful citation lists on Google. So, quite literally, building your supporting data section into each of your product pages is an easy way to bolster your own citations on Google and to make sure that AI is seeing you as a resource that it can trust for this data as well. Because AI extracts not ideas, it extracts sections, it extracts questions, sentences. So the more clear and purposeful it all is, it all becomes easier for AI to reorganize and reuse. And so that leads us easily into number four, which is format
Yeah,
for
I'll get.
scalability.
I'll show one quick example because I see our friends from Belmar are joining too. So I figure I'll show their site. So what you were saying, Lauren, where how do they help ensure consistent quality? And then you can kind of see just straight bullets of exactly how they do that. So I thought that was a good kind of visual example we could quickly share of, kind of breaking that down into a section on a page.
Yeah, that's perfect. And when you type in the company into AI and ask them how they ensure consistent quality, I would expect those four bullets
Quick
to be
reference.
there verbatim. Yeah. So, now that we've done this organization into clear sections, I think that thinking about how the sections are presented is something that we might have forgotten about the importance of as communicators because good formatting makes reading easier to navigate. Um, it makes it feel cosmetic, but it also influences how we understand the page. So with this principle, we encourage everybody to format their pages for scannability, which is not like a dictionary word, but instead one that we have been using to simplify the concept of formatting for the visual reader or the AI system. So there are like four really easy points to remember here when you're formatting for scannability. The first is short paragraphs. Long walls of text make it harder to understand where the idea ends and begins. So breaking content into shorter paragraphs will really help create digestible chunks that make information easier to process. Then second is descriptive headings. Every heading should answer the question, what is this section about? And so, as we talked about earlier, whether that is a good heading that is super descriptive or has a question, it has someone understanding what the page's structure is before they've even read the single paragraph. The answer is answered. The answer is there before the question is even asked. Then number three is lists and bullets. Seems simple, but you've probably seen it in your own AI summaries where you search because AI loves lists. They just love lists. They love lists and bullets, and they isolate facts and features and steps in that format all the time. So it's easier for AI and people to read. So we highly encourage you to use bullets and lists wherever applicable because those are going to be some of the first things that AI lifts out of a website. And then fourth, this piece is Something that's a little bit more overlooked, and we're going to get into this in a couple more principles more deeply. Consistent structure is something that might have been sort of overlooked unless you've been in the weeds of digital strategy and web development before. When people follow, when pages follow similar patterns, people and AI systems begin to expect and recognize it. So, like if a page always goes overview, how it works, application supporting evidence, for example, for each drug in a company's pipeline, it becomes way easier for the visitors, AI investors to recognize where to find that information, where it lives, and where to look for it on the next one. So for each type of page, whether it's like an article page or a leadership biography page or an R&D description page, those should have consistent structures across them. And we'll get way more into detail when we get to Principle 7 on that. But again, like the point here is we're not changing what we're saying, just like sections. This is just making information easier to understand, easier to be read and interpreted, organized in a way that AI is able to pull the information out of the page and deliver it into a summary. And formatting makes this info easier to find, but the next principle is how to make that information easier to understand just by removing ambiguity. And by removing that, what are we left with? Facts, clearly stated facts. Like another really important principle here is to be explicit when you're writing for AI, because as humans and as writers, we are good at filling in the gaps when we have just a little bit of context and a few words. We can infer what people mean from context in their sentences, but AI systems don't have brains and they're not always is good at making those assumptions. So being really explicit, more explicit than might feel natural to talk about, is key for AI to pick up your content. So here are these examples here. Instead of saying our platform, be clear in what your platform is. What is your platform? Our AI-driven drug discovery platform. Bam, that's going to come up on AI. Instead of this approach or our approach, it is this CRISPR gene editing approach. So we have three keywords, very clearly what the section is focused on and what the content is focused on. Our approach is clear now. Instead of a revolutionary medicine for lung cancer, what is the medicine? Who's the audience? And what does it achieve? Identify the product by name and explain, exactly what it is, because reducing ambiguity creates these stronger signals for AI to extract and trust. And when your content is clear about what you're describing, that is like a tenfold signal to AI that you are trustworthy and that you should be listed in those cited sources. Just don't assume that computer readers or AI ever know what anything is. Name the technologies, the diseases, and concepts directly whenever possible, like including partners and drug names and hospitals and physicians, whatever is appropriate and legal to say online. That is the details that you should be putting in there.
Yeah.
Obviously, if something is restricted, please don't put that online. But whenever possible, the more details, the better.
And I think definitely how over the last year people have gotten better at writing prompts. Because we've all experienced if you aren't specific enough in the prompt, the AI will go off in a completely random direction. So you can imagine it's similar when you're writing the content. You want the AI to interpret what your page is about and why and when to reference it.
Yeah, like basic writing principles. Sometimes it feels like when we're talking about this, but it's easy to forget.
Yeah.
And so that kind of brings us into the back end of the principles, which are less tactical and more strategic because we've kind of focused on the find and extract themes so far. But now we're going to get into the trust theme because AI doesn't just evaluate one page at a time, right? It looks for consistency across your page structure, reinforced key messages, repetitive words, and your entire content ecosystem should be reflective of those messages. And kind of like at this point, writing and communication strategy very much so overlap because we know that the companies that are showing up in AI searches are not necessarily saying more or necessarily the best in their field. they are reinforcing their messages and ideas consistently across multiple channels to be able to get seen by AI. And they're doing it really well and effectively and repetitively. And this is like an easy way for anybody who's interested in ranking in AI searches to find their messages reiterated if they continuously reinforce them against their own content. So, like, if your website describes your company one way, your press releases describe it the other way, and your executives use completely different language on LinkedIn, it all creates weaker signals for the AI and for humans. Like if a life science company had three different mission statements, we might not necessarily trust them as much as one that has a consistent one. So, because I guess what I'm trying to say here is like reinforcing key messages across multiple sources is what builds long-term confidence in humans and AI. But ultimately, this like really strengthens your brand's presence and your credibility in AI-driven content discovery landscapes. It's by feeding all of these from the cloud into this consistent message from across these different sources, AI will trust you as the dominating source on your message. And so it really is just a matter of over and over and over again, hammering home the messages that you want repeated
Yeah.
everywhere.
Staying consistent, staying true. And I think that's why with the back to the beginning with choosing between now you went from a ton of random content to rank to becoming an authority over a topic. And that's why it's so important when you are managing your strategy. It is a lot to get it's consistent across so many channels and done in the right way. So definitely right, Lauren. It's important to understand, okay, maybe there is a batch of topics that we're focused on when we could be more. But yeah, just seeing the value of that focus is definitely more and more emphasized.
Yeah, and like that's what I meant when I said that this is really where writing and communication strategy overlap because as soon as you want to narrow down on your specifics, then you need to understand how all of your audiences are interpreting it in your different channels.
Hmm.
Clarity is number one.
Yeah.
And then for the last principle, I kind of want to like zoom out one last time. We've been talking a lot about individual sections and individual pages, but this last principle is about making sure the structure of your page matches what your page is trying to accomplish. And that's kind of what I was starting to talk about under format for
Mhm.
scannability. This is something much bigger and more digital strategy focused. Not every page should be written the same way. I know that almost goes against what we were just saying about how we should be explicit and how it should be organized in a stepwise fashion, answer the question and give explanations and details. But it actually matters more about the type of content on your page and making sure that that is matched to its structure more than anything. Every page should have a primary purpose, and then your content should be structured so that it clearly fulfills that purpose. So, like, I know, Donato, you and I have seen this mistake that organizations have made, which is using the same structure across their website for all pages. But really, when every page has a different job, if every page follows, the same template, you're forcing visitors and AI to work harder to understand anything on the page, like what it's trying to accomplish. So,
Yeah, yeah. The way that you're outlining here, it's important to understand the which intent each page is serving.
yep. So specific types of pages have a specific intent and should match their function. So really in life sciences, we have these four main types of pages quite often. The article page, which classically explains a topic, that is its primary purpose. Someone probably arrived to the article page with a question. So we
This
want to answer
is
that question first.
Yeah, this is an important one because what I hear sometimes in life science companies is they're resistant to do some of these article pages because they'll say our prospects or people that we work with, if they don't know this, they're not our target. But it's hard to have that topical authority and covering everything if you don't have an article like that. So I like how just this is a good way to explain it. It says, no, like we understand that, but if we want to come up when they're searching for things that are more specific and relevant, we have to first demonstrate that overall competency over the topic, even at a more basic level in some cases.
Oh yeah, and sometimes these article pages are, gate kept on different sides of the website that most users can't even access unless they click through to the details of the
The
product,
insights and
whatever
all
it might
that.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I urge life science communicators to rethink maybe stating the obvious with some of these articles, like Donato said, becoming a
Yeah.
subject
It could
matter
be a deeper
authority.
content. You don't want it to be it on the
Yeah.
product page and then it says, what is this? And it's so basic that they say, well, I know, that's why I'm interested in the product.
Right. It could answer something way more niche, whatever
Hmm.
that might be,
Yeah.
how things might affect groups in the future or AI, whatever it might be. So, in the similar way of a lot of the content that you're used to, article pages are very clear with their, direct answer, explanation, and details. That's going to follow the format that we just talked about earlier. Um, a platform page, slightly different job. We're defining a technology, not just describing something. So, like, instead of telling the story for the article, we want to establish what is the platform? How does it work? And more importantly, why does it matter? Because that really is the information that users are probably looking for when they come to read about a platform. Then the product page, demonstrate outcomes. If you have a marketed product, of course, I'm sure your product marketing team knows everything on how to demonstrate the outcomes successfully online. But this just, again, shifts the goal of the page structure, really. This is not like about defining the technology or a topic. It's about demonstrating the value of the product. So, like, the page should naturally emphasize clear definitions of the product, what its intended use is, and of course, the supporting evidence and any of the data that the company might have to have brought it to market. And then the disease area, I've done a lot of this over the course of my early biotech career. Writing disease area pages to educate audiences is a completely different beast still. An educational resource is a different type of talking to people, expecting that you need to explain more upfront. Potentially, AI and human systems have no understanding of what this disease is. Really, usually visitors are trying to like understand the disease before they understand the solution or your product. So when you're writing disease area pages, start with the disease overview, explain what it is, explain what the unmet need is, explain the treatment landscape, and then introduce your product or whatever your story is and how your company might be helping to solve that problem. And so, kind of just keeping these pages very clearly defined to their jobs will help AI then be able to go through your site and say, hey, this is an article page. Hey, this is their platform page. Oh, this is their disease area page. And when it starts to see these consistent, like structural signals across different pages, it will start trusting you as an authority in whatever these areas of expertise are. And then we have a couple examples we wanted to go through that might help bring this to life. This is an example of a really good article page, I thought, from Novartis. Like they hit all five of our major tactical principles up front. This is a what is cell and gene therapy article, right? They lead with the definition. What are cells and genes? Cells are X. Then they have these really nice explanations of what a cell is and what a chromosome is, along with a nice visual. Principle two, question-based headers. Bam, bam, bam. Four of them in this page. This is a pre-AI page too, I'm pretty sure. They were on top of it before they even knew that AI was looking for it. Section three, principle three, the sections are really clearly defined, again, via those question-based headings. So you can almost hit two birds with one stone if you use question-based headings effectively. Same with being formatted to scan, just by sticking to some of the principles of having short paragraphs, descriptive headings, and also keeping it in sort of like a list format has created a version of the article that's very easy to scan and understand quickly. And then also they explain their words explicitly. There was no jargon. There were descriptions of any scientific terms that people might not know. So like this combined approach ensures that AI is able to extract accurate information from this. And I found this page through an AI search. So that just goes to show you how successful it can be when implemented. And then the next one we had, so this was an example of a platform page, and I want to kind of talk about this for a minute here. This is a much bigger page and a type of content that we might be a lot more familiar with. This is AstraZeneca. This is their science, their oncology platforms specifically. They have all of their cancer platforms on one page, which initially you might be thinking, oh, that's too much content for AI to synthesize. But it's not because it's incredibly clear in the way that they've delineated their sections, their formatting, and their language. So here they lead with their definitions, of course. They're very clear in their language, what it is, and the explanations. But then what they do something really unique is here they break up their content sections. On this sort of left-hand sided here, it's a jump to section, so you can go into whatever scientific platform that you're curious about reading more. And then this third screenshot here is an example of what that section might look like. Biomarker guided precision medicine. It comes up. Principle five, bam, clear explanation of words. What are biomarkers? Biomarkers are measurable indicators of a biological condition. And then at the end of the section, I wanted to point out that AstraZeneca does something really smart here, which is they bring principle six into the last sentence of this section. They reinforce their key messages about biomarker testing. And if you search this on their website, you will find this sentence reiterated a dozen times because this is their key biomarker message. So they've made sure that that is on their scientific platform page for oncology, as well as on the content for biomarkers, as well as, when they talk about biomarkers on social media or whatever it is. This is just an example of how they've brought that content up really high to signal the AI and humans that this is an important message for them. So this is a really good example of how like the alignment of structure and messaging and page support, yeah, helps AI's ability. This is great if we can scan
Yeah,
through.
kind of the
So you can see
approach.
there is so much content on this page, right?
Mhm.
You might initially think it's almost overwhelming, but it's not because it's structured for scannability, it's formatted for AI to pick up keywords, and each section serves a distinct purpose. And so as we're kind of scanning through, you can see each of these has definitions, words are clearly explained, key messages are clearly driven through. And then there's even more section nuancing that you can go to if you're curious about the cancers themselves.
Mhm.
And then cleanly at the end, they have all of their data. And that is on the
Yeah.
main header page of the platform. So
Yeah,
that's,
very important having the kind of the references.
yep. So that's going to get pulled through to anybody that talks about AstraZeneca's oncological platforms.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so those are the seven principles. I hope that you can see that none of them are like particularly revolutionary, but they're
Yeah.
really good principles of good communication and good writing.
Yeah,
And
I know it's you get a lot of research on this, Lauren, and we've tested it with our own work too. And it's great. It's kind of in the right order, kind of explained, and hopefully it's a good resource. And you had some great things to show here also, kind of some of the things you found in your research process.
oh yeah, like why are these principles so important now is really the bigger question, right? Because it's a new search environment. So it's really like the principles of good communication applied to a new search environment. And there's changes happening in how people consume information. And that makes this way of writing that we're talking about more valuable than ever. And so I think that these are, four huge takeaways that highlight how AI is really reshaping content discovery. The first, AI search is growing. Like Donato just said, I have stats from Google from last year that I feel like are outdated at this point, honest to God, because Google announced that their AI overviews reach over 1.5 billion users. But to Donato's point, like we are literally seeing things pop up with AI overviews we didn't expect. Niche marketing content, whatever it might be. And AI overviews appear in nearly 30% of search queries. That is a number from last year. That is probably only going to go up as Google releases their 2026 reports.
Yeah, they've even already started experimenting this year with making AI mode the default when somebody does a search. And I think they had to backtrack because people weren't quite ready for to be forced down that route yet. But it just shows that they're really pushing in that direction.
They are ready. And I think the people are ready too, because eventually, sooner rather than later, they're talking to AI the way that they talk to humans, really. Like users search conversationally. Um,
And literally a lot of them now too, just using the voice mode and kind of,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
hadn't used it until like a couple weeks ago, but there's an app on the CarPlay that you can start chat talking. I didn't keep doing it because it still felt weird, but people actually do talk to ChatGPT while they're driving to get information about things. So who knows how much further that'll continue going.
As someone who doesn't own a car, this is shocking to me. Yeah, I digress. Yeah, so people are having like literal conversations in their car with AI. So they're question-based
We got a lead from
queries.
a marketing director at this pretty large company that she has no time. She's driving around and she was talking and explaining what they needed from an agency, and we got the lead that way. It's like incredible that she was that's how that happens.
Pretty awesome
Yeah.
because
So yeah, it's definitely conversational. It's only going to keep going that way, and then people are only going to get better at using the prompting to get to what they want to find.
oh, for sure. And this stat from SEMrush was from the end of 2024. The question-based query has grown to more than 20%. If I had to guess, it's probably 40% these days. Then most users scan content. Obviously, we understood this very deeply when we came up with the principle of format for scannability. But like, really, users are scanning your content. They are not reading every word, and AI systems are doing the same by focusing on the key sections. Like Nielsen Norman Group found that 79% of users scan pages and only 16% of them read word for word. And that
Mhm.
is probably continuously going down as people don't even read as much online and they start talking to AI and have them talk to it back, whatever it might be. Also, interestingly, Microsoft last year said that like the attention span of the average adult online is around 8 seconds, which is a little longer than the average TikTok user, but still pretty short than the average writer and reader. So this really just reinforces that scanning behavior. And then finally, this like trust from consistency point that we have mentioned many times, like a repetition and alignment across content is not redundancy. It is trust signals for AI. It builds through that consistent messaging across multiple channels. And Edelman found that a brand message seen across 6 channels earns strong trust from 87% of people versus people who would only trust a brand after one exposure, which are 13% of respondents. So this is pretty similar to how AI systems evaluate credibility as well.
So
Yeah, and so how does this all tie into life sciences? Like I've said 3 or 4 times, AI content is not about making science simpler. It is about making complex science easier to understand without sacrificing accuracy. And we do that through formatting, through clear language, through consistency. Because I know that I have heard from my peers that they have concerns about optimizing content for AI in case we oversimplify complicated scientific information, but that is the opposite of what I'm advocating for here. Because in science, like it's always been two competing goals, right? You've had one hand of the content of your needing to be scientifically rigorous enough to be credible with your researchers and your sophisticated audiences. And then the other hand, it has to be understandable for your patients and your investors and your journalists. And now AI systems sit in this group as well. So it's not necessarily to make it less technical, it's just to make it easier to understand, navigate, and communicate. It's an important distinction. I just wanted to firm that up.
awesome. Well, I know we're getting close on time, and I'd love for you to get to the immediate next steps of what you would do if you were in some of these people's seats that are watching today.
Let's go to the next slide.
All right. And then we have one question in the Q&A. If anybody wants to pop a few in extra, please do. And I don't mind staying a few minutes over, but I'm assuming some people have to drop off for 1 o'clocks.
Yeah.
That's
So
fine when you are.
when you send these slides around Donato, everybody can just take a second to sit on this slide when you get them. There are a few, immediate things that you can do now. You don't have to redesign your whole website tomorrow. You can immediately make some changes that have meaningful impact. You can make sure every page has a clear purpose. So just like before you write a page, sit down and ask yourself, what is this page trying to accomplish? Because that answer should drive both the content and the structure, and then it'll come a lot easier once you have an answer to that question.
Yeah,
Second,
and you can also do that with pages that already exist that are high priority pages. But it is a good, like going forward, right, Lauren? You're saying also as you publish new things, why am I doing this again? And how do I make sure I follow some of these guidelines?
yeah, literally lead with the answer. Make sure your content is clear and improve, like make sure that your content is structurally clear as well. And these can just be like changing your headings, changing your section flow or formatting or whatever, add some bullets. That takes a couple hours. But in sort of this longer term opportunities to make this sustainable impact in AI, really we ask you to kind of drill down into your communication strategy. Make sure that your messaging is aligned across all of your channels for all of your audiences. Do a content audit. Identify where you could potentially write some articles that get you ranked in AI. Figure out where you might need to improve or reduce. Make sure that when you, like, for example, if you're going to rebuild your website, for example, think about how your website architecture is structured so that your pages really work together instead of them existing in isolation. And then maybe consider executing an AI visibility assessment on yourself. Literally evaluate how your own content is represented in AI. Search your own content, see how it comes up, and evaluate how you want to be presented from your own eyes as well. So, like, my takeaway from this is not that we're like gaming an AI algorithm. It is about applying these good communication principles that we have always known in a way that makes your communications expertise obvious for readers and AI systems. Because focusing on clarity, consistency, and structure are going to be great positioning angles for companies who really want to evolve in this AI landscape because it's not about writing more, it's about making your content easier to find and trust.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. So I would definitely next steps kind of take a look at your priority pages, think through how am I following these guidelines. You can even look at the guidelines and then also even put the URLs into some of the AI systems and say, what can I do to make this more AI friendly? And it'll also give you some tips that you can kind of spot check against our own guidelines that we found too. So want to get into here. Yeah, so you left that slide in about make it easier for people and AI systems to understand. And the more people start to scan and just look at websites like computers, and now computers are doing it, you're kind of optimizing for both sides, which is great. It's a little bit unlike SEO, where for a while there, you're writing pages for SEO, and now you get these huge, 10,000 word pages that no real person would read. At least now with AI, it's coming back more towards something that's more optimized for people that actually are just scanners. I have a couple of questions in the Q&A. Tammy's asking, how does video content play into this and how AI picks it up? And AI is, if you're publishing, especially to YouTube, YouTube is a very frequently cited source for AI answers. So if you are creating YouTube videos and optimizing the titles and the descriptions of what's in them, it can help you get more visibility. And then if you embed those videos on a page, it's also increasing the quality of the page by having images, video, and all these assets. So video plays a great role in a lot of these best practices. Um, let's see. One person says, how do you measure success with these changes? I work with a biotech startup. Our goals have changed a lot over the last 6 years. Should we delete old content? So
Mm.
that's a
Mhm.
great question, and a lot of
Good
companies
question.
do go through that. So if you have a lot of old content that's irrelevant and it's not even relevant to your, either the focus areas that you have or anything about that, then I would recommend kind of removing that old content. And then in the process of removing that, look at what should remain and what would need a rewrite based on your new priorities. And then in terms of measuring it, the tool I like to use is SEMrush, and you can go in and put your URL in. I put Catalan in here just because they popped up in that example I was talking about earlier. But that's where you can kind of monitor how many, and I toggled it to US, but you can monitor how many mentions you're getting. So when your company is getting mentioned in an answer, and how many citations you're getting, and how many cited pages there are. So if those numbers are growing over time, that's good. But more importantly, you can also see the prompts that you're getting mentioned in or cited in. And typically, when you go through prompt research, you quickly understand what are the prompts you actually care about. There might be 10 prompts my company cares about. So even if I'm getting mentioned in 100, I want to be in the 10 that I care about. So that's also another way to measure success is to kind of do a more close monitoring of the prompts that you're most interested in. And that's how you can kind of measure your success over time. And then separately from that, there's also just measuring how is AI perceiving your brand or your company, and is it saying a lot of great things about you and it knows exactly what you do, or is it not? So that's another reason to get rid of old content is all that old content on the website and on social media could be confusing the
Hmm.
AI, and you
Yep.
want to get that more. But it is sensitive to fresh content. So if you remove the old and publish new, it is a lot quicker to correct than some other things.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, like, make sure that you don't have conflicting descriptions of your messaging across your website or your articles or whatever it might be. If the older content reflects like previous messaging that your company isn't at that point today, you definitely want to update that wherever that is.
Awesome. We're only 1 minute over or after.
Not bad.
Oh, I'm great. She said that was a helpful answer, so I'm
Awesome.
glad. It's definitely an ongoing thing to monitor. And then, so I'll give it 1 more minute. If anybody does have questions, you can visit our website. We also have other blogs and things that we've done on at raincastle.com. And after this meeting ends, you'll get sent to a survey so you can tell us if we did okay. Give us a rating, checkbox what future webinars you might want to see. And if you want to set up a time for an intro meeting with Raincastle or Lauren, just check that box and we'll follow up. And if you want an AI audit of your current company, just to see how are you doing, and we pay for the subscription for anyway. So if you want to set up a quick meeting and go through it together, there's no obligations or anything. We're just looking to network with more people and show you what's there. And then if you need us in the future, then that's great. So thank you so much, Lauren. I really appreciate you joining
Thank
and
you, Natasha.
putting all this great work into the presentation today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having
All
me.
right, and thanks everybody for taking all this time. We had a lot of people stay on for the whole webinar, and some of them are leaving now. So now I'm convinced that they weren't all just letting it run in the background. So we'll talk. We'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.